2 hours ago, diplomatic sources revealed that the White House has delivered an ultimatum to key allies that represents the most aggressive use of American diplomatic pressure in decades. The message is stark and unambiguous. Join American military operations against Iran or face consequences for your refusal. Not a request for consultation, not an invitation to coalition building. A binary demand backed by threats of economic and strategic retaliation against nations that refuse to participate. Multiple European and Middle Eastern officials, speaking on condition of anonymity, confirmed receiving versions of this ultimatum through diplomatic channels. The core message remains consistent. America is preparing for comprehensive military action against Iran. Allies are expected to provide military support, intelligence cooperation, use of military facilities, and public endorsement. Refusal will be treated as strategic betrayal, carrying tangible consequences for bilateral relationships. This approach breaks fundamentally from how the United States has historically built coalitions for military action. Previous administrations spent months building international consensus, working through UN frameworks, and accepting that some allies would participate while others abstained without facing punishment. The current ultimatum eliminates that flexibility entirely. Sources indicate the ultimatum contains specific demands tailored to each recipient. European NATO allies are expected to provide military assets, ships, aircraft, or special operations forces. Gulf states hosting American military bases must grant explicit permission for facilities to be used in Iran operations. Israel is expected to contribute intelligence and potentially conduct complementary strikes. Nations refusing face explicit threats of reduced intelligence sharing, weapons sales restrictions, economic pressure, and public diplomatic isolation. The consequences outlined are immediate and specific. European nations refusing participation face threats of American withdrawal from NATO defense commitments in their regions. Gulf states face reduction of American military presence that provides their primary security guarantee. Trade partners face tariff threats and exclusion from American markets. Within hours of the ultimatum becoming known through diplomatic leaks, Allied capitals began responding with alarm, anger, and in some cases, defiant rejection. France responded most forcefully. President Macron's office released a statement barely concealing diplomatic fury. France makes sovereign decisions about the use of French military forces based on French national interests and international law. France does not respond to ultimatums. France seeks diplomatic solutions to the Iranian nuclear challenge and will not be coerced into military adventures that serve neither French interests nor regional stability. That language, will not be coerced, represents extraordinary break from typical Allied diplomatic communication. Paris is publicly rejecting American leadership on a major security issue and framing the ultimatum as illegitimate pressure. Germany's response was more cautious, but equally negative. Chancellor's office stated that Germany remains committed to diplomatic solutions and that any German military participation would require Bundestag approval, which current political circumstances make highly unlikely. Translation: Germany is saying no without explicitly defying Washington. The United Kingdom faces the most difficult calculation. London traditionally aligns with Washington on major security issues, but the current ultimatum comes as UK seeks to rebuild European relationships post-Brexit. Prime Minister's office has remained notably silent beyond generic statements about consulting with allies, suggesting internal debate about how to respond. Poland and Baltic states, most dependent on American security guarantees against Russian threats, indicated willingness to provide political support, but noted limited military capabilities to contribute to Middle East operations. These nations face impossible choice: defy Washington and risk losing American commitment to their defense, or support operations that serve no direct national interest. Middle Eastern responses reveal equally stark divisions. Saudi Arabia and UAE, traditionally aligned with American pressure on Iran, are responding with unusual hesitation. Both nations have spent recent years attempting to reduce regional tensions through dialogue with Tehran. Neither wants to be pulled into American military campaign that could trigger Iranian retaliation against their territories. Israeli officials expressed private support for American military action against Iran, but publicly maintained careful distance, understanding that overt Israeli participation would complicate Arab nations' ability to support operations. Egypt and Jordan, recipients of significant American military aid, face calculations about whether supporting American operations serves their interests or destabilizes their domestic situations where anti-American sentiment could be inflamed. The ultimatum's existence becoming public through leaks suggests that recipients want international community aware of the pressure they face. By making the ultimatum public, allies are attempting to rally international opinion against American coercion. International reaction beyond direct recipients has been overwhelmingly negative. UN Secretary-General issued statement emphasizing that military force should be last resort after diplomatic options are exhausted. China condemned what it called efforts to coerce sovereign nations into military coalitions. Russia suggested it demonstrates why nations should reduce dependence on American security guarantees. The strategic problem with ultimatums is that they eliminate middle ground. When allies are told to choose between full participation and facing consequences, they cannot quietly offer token support while maintaining distance. The binary choice forces decisions that reveal alliance fractures and potentially break relationships that diplomatic flexibility would preserve. American officials defending the approach argue that Iranian nuclear threat is existential and that allies either recognize this reality and act accordingly or reveal themselves as unreliable partners. One administration official stated anonymously, "If European allies won't support us on preventing Iranian nuclear weapons, why should American troops defend Europe from Russia? If Gulf states won't let us use bases to address regional threats, why are we providing their security?" This logic represents fundamental shift in American alliance policy. Traditional approach treated alliances as mutual commitments where support on some issues earned goodwill even when nations disagreed on others. The current approach treats alliances as transactional arrangements where support on American priorities is price for American security commitments. Three scenarios emerge from this diplomatic crisis. First, enough allies provide sufficient token participation that Washington can claim coalition support even if actual military contribution is minimal. Everyone saves face, while America proceeds with operations that remain fundamentally unilateral. Second, major allies publicly refuse despite threats. France, Germany, and others prioritize European solidarity over maintaining traditional alliance unity. The transatlantic alliance suffers severe damage. American operations proceed, but Washington faces unprecedented isolation from traditional partners. Third, American threats prove sufficiently credible that allies capitulate despite reservations. Nations participate in operations they believe strategically unwise to avoid consequences they cannot afford. Short-term American pressure succeeds, but creates long-term resentment that drives allies toward greater strategic autonomy. 2 hours ago, the White House delivered an ultimatum that forces allies to choose between participation and consequences. The ultimatum assumes American power is sufficient to compel compliance through pressure. But alliance relationships built over decades don't function purely through coercion. They require mutual respect, shared interests, and recognition that partners have legitimate concerns. The Iran operations may proceed with or without Allied support, but the damage to alliance structures from demanding that support through threats rather than persuasion could outlast whatever tactical success military operations achieve. Allies coerced into participation today remember that coercion tomorrow when American interests require their genuine cooperation. The ultimatum has been delivered. Allies are responding. The fractures are showing. What remains to be seen is whether American power is sufficient to force compliance or whether this moment marks the beginning of a fundamental reassessment by allies about the costs of security relationships that require subordination to American demands. The choice Washington offered was binary. Join or face consequences. The choice allies now face is equally stark. Submit to pressure or assert sovereignty and accept whatever cost that assertion brings. Neither choice serves the alliance structures that have underpinned Western security for 70 years.